The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, who knows. So welcome to our webinar on cybersecurity defense strategy. So today we have quite interesting topics. But before, let's introduce our special guest, Edwin. Edwin?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Edwin Weidema. I'm a global technologist. I'm working in the product strategy team from Veeam. I have a global role, so normally I will travel the world, but now it's virtually traveling the world. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitter at Hyperion, that's where I ramble, and that's my own expressions and opinions. And I'm also a crew member and blogger at feelguru.com. Been with the company for 4 years now. Specialized and focused on cybersecurity. So that's why I joined. Peter?
Cool. So, and I'm Peter Veriken. I'm a cloud solutions architect for EMEA. Used to work only for the Benelux region. A bit over 8 years at Veeam. So, seen quite a lot of things going on here. So, a few notes about the webinar. Everybody is already familiar, of course. Yeah, you were muted on entry. You have questions. Ask anytime, please. Yeah, we will do our best to answer questions during the session, after the session. So if it's not answered yet, then please hang around till the end so that we can answer your question there. Yeah, and of course we will post the recording and the presentation. Yeah, so if for some reason you need to drop out, you will get the recording. So what are we going to talk about in this session? Well, in this session, we're going to talk about the cybersecurity defense strategy, right? So Edwin is going to elaborate on that one. And then we're going into hardening, some general information on hardening. I wouldn't call it too general, it's still very interesting. Then 3, 2, 1, 0, scale out repository deep dive. Maybe you have an idea or a question on why do I see scale out repository deep dive right here in this security strategy session? Well, you will understand why. And last but not least, a question that pops up quite often is, should I offer Veeam Cloud Connect as a service, right, BAS and DRaaS, or should I just go with object storage and get rid of Cloud Connect, because it seems easier. So we will also explain a bit about that. So Edwin, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just finished my coffee here. So let me click and let's see if the technology lost me this morning. So why should I care? That's cybersecurity. Why should I care? Yeah, it's important. If you look at the businesses, we see two types. One that's being hacked already, and the second that's next in line. So if you're not being hacked, you could be next in line there. And what we do with a cybersecurity defense strategy is making sure that you are going to buy some time, because between being hacked and next in line, if you can increase that gap by buying time, it makes sure that you have a strategy in place. Because if you have a strategy in place, what we have seen in the field and around the globe is that you get more time. And if you look at cybercriminals, they are just like normal criminals. They will just look at houses and will see which one is the easiest to get into, or which one has the most value. And those two together will be used to drive the breach, the hack, trying to get in. So make sure that you're not the weakest of the pack, and let's get them to your neighbor instead of to you. So cybersecurity defense strategy. If you look at how you could do that, you have to look at the company itself. Companies are being built of people, processes, and technology. Those three interact together. It's not just about technology. It's not just about people. It's not just about process. It's that interaction and that glue together. Because people will leverage technology. Technology will enable processes. And people will follow those processes and procedures to get services going, to get products out. and they all drive on one thing, and that's data. And we've been talking about that for a long time. Data is the lifeblood of any organization nowadays. So you're driving on that one. So if you're doing a cybersecurity defense strategy, build it around those three and combinations in it. So if you look at people, think about their roles. Do screening of people you hire or people you work with, or have like third-party contractors. Make sure that you screen people. Often when there's been a breach and I've been invited in, sometimes I just see people working with highly classified information that hasn't even been screened. And if they even done a Google search, they would find out that it wouldn't have been that a good thing to let that particular person towards that high confidential data. So screening is part of that one. Also education. And what I've seen in the market is that a lot of people are screaming about, yeah, we have to make everyone cyber secure aware, but then we're forgetting a stage, because you also have to have behavior in place. If you look at companies, what do? If we are not all working from home, but back in the company, we have fire drills like every quarter or yearly. But cybersecurity is much more intrusive for businesses. Why don't we do a cyber exercise? Why do we not make sure that people have run through a cyber breach so they know how to react? So if that phone is being picked up at the receptionist and there's someone from the news calling you, have you been breached, sir or madam? Then you know how to behave and who to connect to and what the company and the people in the company should do. And then we get to another stage. It's digital hygiene, especially around COVID. We all know, wash your hands, make sure, united, make sure that you keep distance. Also try to keep distance more than 6 feet or 1.5 meters from cybercriminals. Because if you come closer to them, they can skim your wallet, because the digital wallet can be picked up within that 6 feet. So digital hygiene is important. Remove passwords you no longer use. Remove applications you no longer use. Do patch management. Make sure that you have your software up to new standards, because a lot of those breaches have been done through old software, old installations that are just in the corner and nobody knows about it. So don't touch it. As long as it runs, don't touch it. But if you don't know what's going on there, that is an attack point and a serious breach into your infrastructure in your organization. So on the processor side, make sure, and process, not just process, but also procedures, they are mostly tangled together. Have a business continuity plan. But in the business continuity plan, make sure you have an incident response plan. And that can be for if you have a fire, if you have a flooding, if you have a burglary, but also if you have a digital event that's causing your business to be disrupted. And if you're doing an infrastructure, and a lot of things are being tied to infrastructure and IT, but cybersecurity is not just about IT. It's not about the tools and infrastructure. It's also about those processes. How are you working with them? How are you interacting with them? So make sure that there are design principles in place. The 3-2-1 backup rule. Make sure you have 3 copies of your data. We will go into that a little bit more later on. But also the principle of least privilege. If you go to the left side for the screening and the roles, if you have someone that has accountancy role, that shouldn't be in the cafeteria, and vice versa. Why don't we also apply that to the digital world? If you have a backup administrator, make sure he doesn't have access to the production data. But also, one that's controlling production data should not have control of backup data. So make sure that they have the right roles and the right privileges in place to do their work. So don't tamper and harm them in their roles, but make sure that they can do their roles efficiently and without interfering with other ones. So secure by design, and I often call that KISS. Keep it stupidly simple. Make sure that you don't oversubscribe, put all kinds of security things in place that will harm your business. Because if you look at how people cross the street and there's a path that is faster and it's through the grass towards the other side, what will people do? They will just bypass all your security measures and go straight across through the grass to the other side. So think about that one. And patch management, if you see, it can control and be tied to the digital hygiene. Because if you don't do patch management, you're not really digital hygiene there. So let's think of that. And then we will go into technology, because technology can help you there. With your cybersecurity defense strategy, technology is utility. It's a tool. It can really help, but make sure you do the right things there. So authentication and authorization is tied to how you do business continuity, design principles, but also screening and roles in your organization within people. Let that reflect in your authentication and authorization model. Make sure hardening, because a lot of those things are being put in place without even looking. It's just next, finish, and we're done. But that's not the way it should be working. Go to those processes. We have design principles. Run through them. Make sure that there's a design. Make sure that hardening is part of the design. And of course, with tools, hardware, software, make sure that you use those tools in the correct order. But also, don't be scared about tools. Use them to the full stability there. We will zoom a little bit more into hardening this session, because if you let me ramble about it, and Peter will take over later on, we can talk about hours for this. So make sure we're doing hardening now. But if you have other things you would like us to see, just put it in the chat, let us know. We can zoom into that in like later sessions. So looking at cybersecurity defense strategy. If you look at the technology, and we're going to zoom in on that technology, we have things we have to do is risk management. And risk management is built on 5 pillars. Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. If all things go bad, make sure that you can recover. Yeah, no, technology is barking on me, so there we go. If you look at this, this is the combination of making sure that we have the NIST cybersecurity framework together with Veeam. How would that look like in your environment? How could you leverage Veeam into that risk management? If you look at identify, we could use features like intelligent diagnostics, change tracking and auditing. If you look at protect, we have a lot of things in the protect, and especially around immutable storage. I think you were already being bombarded by everything around immutable storage. But it's important because that will not change. So it is a real good hardening and countermeasure for cyber attacks. Also, we have detect. Use data labs, use data integration API to do, for instance, forensics, do tracking, but also patch management. Run it in a data lab so you know what the outcome will be if you put that patch onto your production systems. It's also a lot where people oversee that capability within the Veeam product, but it can really help you detect where there are maybe possible breaches going on, or where there's some weak links in your infrastructure. Make use of that. You can also do respond. You will see it's building up. I couldn't put all features on this slide because it would be really hard to read, because you will need a magnifying glass to get into that one. But yeah, if you look at the respond, we can use data labs. CDP, what we brought out with version 11. So if you have to respond, there is something going on, and you have to shield one of those zones because there's a breach, you could use, for instance, CDP to fail over to another platform, to that same machine, but running in a different zone. And that zone is clear and conscious, and we can work there. And of course, recover. We have all sorts of instant recoveries to get your business back online fast. And with that, that's like, it's been updated with my colleague, Andre. He made that slide again. So we are now on 91 different, there we go, 91 different restore capabilities within Veeam. And that's huge, but it's also needed. If something goes wrong and it goes up the ass there, now we call it, you have ways to restore your data, but also your systems and everything tied towards that. So 91 restore capabilities from the same data set, from the same backup file. So let's have a quick poll. Kirill, can you pull up the poll there? So a quick poll. Let's select one of the following. Is your infrastructure already hardened? We're really curious how you are standing at this moment. How are you doing? So we're waiting on everyone. So give some people some room. Are you fully hardened? Is there room for improvement? No, but I don't know about hardening there. Or harden what? Never heard about that. Why should I care? And that's about the cybersecurity. And it's just one part in your cybersecurity defense strategy. But we think it's relevant for your whole infrastructure. And let's see how we're doing there.
It's looking pretty positive.
Yes, we have a quick poll. So, yes, fully hardened, 9%. Yes, but there's room for improvement. And really, that makes me happy because people take this serious now. And if you look at the poll we did 2 or 3 years ago, I think, hardening, that was one that was topping the ranks now. And now, yeah, there's room for improvement. Okay, there's always room for improvement, but so glad that so many people already are doing to the max capabilities they have, and also looking for new ways of hardening their systems and making sure that they are secure. Can we go back to the presentation? Yes. There we are. Let's see if I can have some control back. Hope so. Yeah, there we are. So hardening. Let's dive a little bit in. If you look at Veeam, and I often get this question with different companies, how can we harden Veeam? But if you look at Veeam itself, we run on top of an infrastructure. We're software defined. So depending on how you deploy us, which components you're using, how you deploy it in your infrastructure, how is your authentication. So zoom in to a lot of those areas. So physical security. It's like a no-brainer, but I still see people forgetting that. Make sure that you have physical security in place. And the most important part, make sure you have visibility. So if you have cameras and there's a room, as soon as people get a feeling they are being watched, they start behaving. If they don't have the feeling they are being watched, they're starting to do stupid stuff. And from experience, I've seen some really stupid stuff, like unpatching cables in a data center from one customer towards another and breaching 2 networks with 1 cable that was being borrowed from the third party. So yeah, to make sure that that doesn't happen, make sure that you have visibility in there. If you look at hardware security, if you have multiple things and multiple people running through your data center, make sure that some things are being locked. And there can be a rack that's being locked down, or can even be a server or storage system that's being locked down. So you make sure that it's not easy to just rip it out and remove it. Because if you don't have that visibility in the physical security, and you don't have hardware security in place, all of a sudden you can go into your data center and look at it. It's really nice and tidy, but they're missing something. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. And then we go on to the infrastructure, the secure infrastructure itself. Veeam is running on top of it. So if you want to make sure that Veeam is secure, also make sure that you have those steps beneath it. Make sure that that infrastructure, and we all run, a lot of companies run on virtual infrastructures. So we have a lot of hypervisor hosts running there. Make sure, and there are capabilities in there. For instance, if you look at VMware, you now have a capability to do an AT test. So if you have a TPM chip in those hypervisor hosts, you can run a report that shows you if those machines have been tampered with. So you have a statement, okay, this is what the infrastructure was, this is how it's now today, there's no sign of any breach, there's no sign of tampering, we're all good to go. Segmentation, already talked about that one. Often when I talk about segmentation, people will jump on and say, yeah, we have VLANs. That's good, but it's just small part of that total puzzle around segmentation. Think about it as the Titanic. If you have the Titanic and if they have done it properly and did the KISS design, they wouldn't have sunk that ship. Well, what they did is they cut some corners. So those water barriers were not to the full, so not to the ceiling. They had a gap above it. Yeah, that's where your security gap is. So make sure that it's all to the top. And if you have that, then if one of those zones is being breached, you can shut it down. Make sure that those firewalls block any traffic going in and out of that zone. Make sure that that's specific compartment you can just write off. And some real interesting law enforcement agencies now have escape pods in their environment. It looks a little bit like Star Trek, but if you think about it, it's really cool because they have an escape pod with all their critical systems like domain controllers, some backups and some other things, and they can just eject that from the rest of their system. So they will have something that's completely untouched, and they can always rebuild with that as a heart of the infrastructure. So security domains, also one of those questions is being popped up often. Do I place those Veeam components into a workgroup, or do I place them in the production domain? Whatever you do, don't place them in the production domain. Always separate from the environment you're protecting from. So if it's a smaller organization, go with a workgroup. If your organization is a little bit bigger, create a second Active Directory. Make sure that there is a management domain in there, and that's controlling any administrative privilege account in your production. But also make sure that you have two-factor authentication on that particular management domain. And you just make sure that production is trusting the management domain. So management is trusting nobody, and we know about that one, but they are controlling the production domain. So they can make sure that everything runs smoothly without being affected. And then we get to firewalls. That's the same on the segmentation. They are interlinked together. Make sure that you have different firewalls with different means on different locations. The outside perimeter, make sure that it's just package going in and out. So source destination, just IP traffic being scanned. That's all. Just block everything that's from China or something else that's coming in, or Russia or UK, Brexit. Maybe we should look there. But no, it's just kidding there. Make sure that you can block some traffic that's coming in that shouldn't be coming in, or you already know because those lists are there that some IPs are being misused or being hacked and being used to breach other systems. So you can block them, or temporarily or completely. But also place firewalls that have application-aware traffic meshes more on the zone. So every zone will have its firewall. So you get more, microsegmentation. That's also why microsegmentation took a little bit of a leap in the last few years. And we also have firewalls running on Veeam components, and we open those up for specific services. So we will change parts of those firewalls for the working and making sure that Veeam traffic will flow from and to the different components. But Peter will go into that a little bit more deeper later on. So VM security, that's the other container. Make sure that VM in base, the template, is safe. So if you're running templates, make sure that you harden the template, and the template is being used to install Veeam components on top of it. Sounds easy, right? Just make sure it's secure by design in the base. Also, segregation of duties. Already talked about that, but make sure that the production storage admin has no control over the backup storage, and vice versa. Let them hate each other. That's the best way. If they hate each other, they will just stay off and make sure that happens. So encryption. It's popping up more and more. Make sure that data that is highly riskable, let me say it like that, is being protected by encryption. And then we go on to repository hardening, or more about the data hardening itself. Make sure that the data is being hardened. And let's dive into that one. For this one, it's the 3-2-1 rule. And on the 3-2-1, think about those other two that we can add as Veeam. Make sure it's air-gapped, immutable. Immutable is one that's the real interesting one. And Peter will dive into that more in technical detail on how we can do it. But also make sure that if you have a backup, that you can recover. That's one part of that cybersecurity plan that has to be in place. So let me hand it over to Peter for this one.
Yes, thank you, Edwin. Wow, super interesting. So if you think about it, it's not that simple, right? It's not just one checkbox and we're done. It's quite a lot of checkboxing there. So yeah, good stuff. So let's dive into the scale-out backup repository, or SOBR as we call it, to make it easier. Because this is one of the features, one of the functionalities that we have enhanced over the past few years, and there's quite some improved security measures that you as a service provider can definitely benefit from. Yeah. So just as a quick recap, what is a scale-out repository? Well, scale-out repository has a performance tier. Yeah, look at it as, for example, a short-term storage, which is maybe a little bit more expensive, right? But it is fast, because what do you need it for? You need fast recovery. Yeah. Let's be clear on that. So let's say you store your clients' backups on this one, 14 days, 30 days. Yeah. So 90% you can cover from the really fast storage. Yeah? Next to that, we have our capacity tier. Yeah? Our capacity tier being with object storage. Yeah? So I can very easily offload an entire copy of my performance tier to the capacity tier, or maybe just move GFS backups, right? Those weekly, monthlies, yearlies, which I don't really want to hang around on the performance tier, can move them to the capacity tier. Yeah? So lots of options there as well. We've also added Google Platform, right? For those who didn't know, next to AWS and Azure, IBM, and then of course the S3 compatible, which has tons of variants there. And now in version 11, maybe you've already seen, we have also introduced the archive tier, yeah, which is another, let's say, extension to the scale-out repository. Yeah? So where you can say, okay, 30 days I keep on my performance tier, then I will migrate it to my capacity tier, and then further on, let's say after 180 days, I will move it on over to Glacier or Azure Blob storage. Yeah, so that we can have the most efficient way and also the most cost-effective way of setting our backup storage up. Yeah? And the most important part here is probably that you can, today you can reach the immutability from start to finish. Yeah? Before, we only had the immutability available in the capacity tier. Yeah? So if you lost your performance tier, then, well, luckily you still had everything in the capacity tier, yeah, but maybe you would have to download it, maybe some costs involved. So now, thanks to the hardened Linux repository, there is also a way to protect that data from hackers, ransomware, yeah, so that you can keep helping your clients with a restore, yeah, that you do not have to be impacted, or if your client deploys it, that at least they know there is an option. And if we look at the entire picture, we can have immutability in 3 different tiers, right? So if we configure this, then really something has to go really, really wrong in this world for us to not be able to restore. Yeah? So that's what this is all about. And if you're not sure, for example, in regards to performance tier, capacity tier, archive tier, like what is the best fit? Well, of course, archive tier, that one is easy, right? Because it's just Glacier and Azure Blob. But let's say for the other ones, if you want to know what storage is compatible or what I already have, will it work with object storage? For example, we have the Veeam Ready program, right? So if you just look in your favorite search engine, Veeam Ready, then you will come on this page where you can find all the different tested hardware models, right, or softwares that work, let's say, that have been tested by us together with the vendor that's got our stamp of approval, like, okay, this works as a immutable object storage, right, or as a great repository. Yeah? So let's dive into the performance tier itself. Yeah, so the performance tier. So now, as I explained, we have enhanced this one with the hardened Linux repository. Yeah? So why would you want to deploy this? Obviously, to provide a malware-safe repository, yeah, but also not just external, but insider protection, yeah, because there is maybe always somewhere some administrator who has a bad day, who might want to delete some things, or Friday is my last day at the job, so let me make it interesting for people on Monday, yeah, so maybe I can delete some things. Well, this is important that this can also protect you for that. Yeah. Now, I put one exclamation mark there, yeah, if set up correctly, yeah, because and I will explain this further on. But as a root, you can still wipe out the backups, right? So there again comes Edwin's story on the security strategy, right? Segmentation, access control, these kind of things. Make sure that not just any administrator in the IT department can access this, right? Only maybe 1 or 2 people who actually have access, and maybe they even need to drive to the data center to have physical access to be able to do something on that server, but remotely nobody should be able to touch that, right? So where can we set this up? Once we add the backup repository, then you will see the option of make recent backups immutable for X days. For example, the last 7 days here, we will make immutable and protected from deletion. Now, how do we add this repository, which is also pretty interesting, is you can add it with single-use credentials. Yeah, so it's literally written there, single-use credentials for hardened repository. And what this does is you can type in the credentials, yeah, to once, let's say, elevate to root to install it, yeah, to install this immutability service. But we will only use these credentials once, and we will not store them in the database. If you afterwards go back into the Veeam console, you will see this screen, it will just be empty. Yeah, so, and then next time, if you would have to upgrade or we bring out a patch or a new version, it will ask you again to put in credentials, yeah, because we don't have them. So that's pretty cool. So what's the result of this? Well, if I go in there and I would like to delete something, I will get the following message. It tells me that unable to delete immutable backups, and it will also tell me that they are immutable until a certain date. Yeah, so I can just not delete them. So that's really the idea here. And if we go and have a look on the server itself, and we check the attributes of our backup files, then we can see that we set the I of immutable. Yeah, so we set the immutable flag. So basically, the service that will write, the transport service that will write those backup files to the disk will set the flag, but once the flag is set, it can no longer be modified. Yeah, so it kind of rewrite it, but then it's only the immutable service which runs under root that can actually remove this flag in order for us to delete backups. Yeah? So one very important thing is this compatible with all of the jobs, or do I need to change something in my current setup? Well, for this to be able to work, we need to use backup jobs that do not merge. Yeah, so we need forward incremental with weekly fulls. Yeah, so synthetic full is the most famous one, let's say, so that you recreate a full backup from the previous chain, and then we continue again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. Yeah, it will even throw you a message today. So just to point you to this. Yeah. Also, for the backup copy job, yeah, it will tell you that you need to use the GFS retention policy. Yeah, without it, it will not work. Now, maybe some of you will immediately get confused, right? But also, I can not say this enough. In version 11, we have changed the way that the GFS retention works in the backup copy job, right? Or yeah. So please go and have a look at the blog post. It's also written in the user guide, yeah, but maybe you haven't seen it yet or haven't found it yet. So here you can find QR code, or just go and read the blog. It's been recently published that explains what exactly has been changed and what is the impact of this. Yeah? So please go and have a look on that. So then when we have a look at the architecture itself, what is the difference? So let's see, on top we have Windows machines, and at the bottom we have Linux. Yeah? So we have a Linux proxy and a Linux repository, and the same on the top for Windows. So we can see all the ports that are being used. Yeah? So we can see already that on the hardened Linux repository on the right bottom, that the amount of ports is drastically less than traditional Windows repository. Yeah? So that's pretty cool if you think about it. So we only require TCP 6162 yeah, for the transport service, and the TCP ports 2500 to 3300, they are automatically opened and closed when jobs are running, yeah, and afterwards when they stop, the ports are closed, of course. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. When you look at it, the firewall, you will not immediately understand that those ports are not written there, but they're actually open and closed on demand. Yeah. Now, how do you manage this? Well, I know a lot of you will still enable SSH, right? Because you need to somehow connect to it, update this machine. But ideally, we even close up SSH. We do not want anybody to be able to access this repository again. Access should be only possible via ILO drag, for example, right? So you go to the data center and you go and manage the access there. No remote access whatsoever. And there is also no way to connect to this repository over TCP 6162, right? It's just the transport service between Veeam components, and that's it. Yeah? So ideally, we do not use these ports and we just throw them away. Yeah, so of course you can always re-enable them if you need to do some updates, right? You need to change something. Don't forget to disable it again, yeah, or at least firewall it that it's only accessible from a certain IP address from a certain management, like a jump host, bastion host, or something like that. All right. Also, the immutability can be extended. So imagine that something is going wrong. Let me just think of, let's say, a lawsuit, right? And some things are under investigation. We want to make sure the data cannot be changed. Yeah. So through a very simple PowerShell script, we can go in there and set the date. We cannot set the date to the past, right? Because that would defeat the entire purpose of this. But we can set the date to something in the future. Yeah, time is in UTC, so be aware of that. What is your time zone? So you can change it, and then you are sure that it cannot be deleted for this period. All right. So next thing, capacity tier. Yeah, so if we have a quick recap on where we are in this scale-out repository, yeah, I'm talking about this part right here. Yeah, capacity tier. So we're talking object storage. Yeah? So many of you we've seen are already using AWS, Azure Blob, or S3 compatible storages on premises. Yeah? Just a quick recap for those who haven't gone to the capacity tier yet. Yeah? Why would you use it? Because you can also have immutable backups there. Yeah, so you can protect your clients' local and or offsite backups in a very easy way. Because again, immutable backups cannot be deleted, encrypted, etc. Not to forget that we already have this since version 10. Yeah, so if this is the first time that you hear about it, then let's hope it is a joke, because we already have it for let's say more than a year. Yeah, so maybe it's time to have a quick look at this feature, because it's so easy and so powerful. So how do you set this up? Very simple, just a few clicks. You go to the object storage, you add it to the scale out repository, set up the policy, and you're good to go. Yeah, so just to make it easy, how does it look like from the interface itself? You add the object storage. Yeah? There you also set make recent backups immutable for. Yeah, so you set the amount of days, exactly the same as the hardened Linux repository, basically. Simple checkbox, right? Amount of days, but the object storage must support the S3 object lock feature. Yeah, this is very important. They are not on bucket level, but on the object level. When we have added the repository, we can add it to a scale out. Yeah, so we just go and edit the scale out, add a capacity tier, and for example, we select copy to. And when we select copy to, it means I don't have to think about what will be copied, because everything which is on my performance tier will be a one-on-one mirror in my object storage. So I don't have to think about if something goes wrong or server explodes or something. I will have everything one-on-one in my object storage. So how does this look like when you're using the copy mode? So we have a performance tier. We're creating our full backup. Well, obviously the full backup will be copied to the capacity tier. Yeah. It will not be in the same format. It will not be the VBK. It will be, let's say, cut into pieces, right? Like a big Lego box, all kind of pieces, objects, and metadata. That's the best comparison I can make. And then on a daily basis, when you create your incrementals, all of them will eventually end up in your capacity tier. Yeah? And the big thing here is that it's automatically offloaded. You don't have to do anything. Yeah. So when it's created, it's immediately offloaded to the capacity tier. Yeah? If we enter the immutability here, for example, 7 days, then we are good. This is all protected. Yeah? So now if I go to the interface and I want to play around and delete some stuff, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to delete anything because the backups are marked till the 18th of March as immutable. Yeah, so great stuff there. Hacker cannot remove these backups. Nobody, in fact, can remove these backups. Yeah. But now also another scenario. Imagine that our performance tier is not available. Yeah. Not available could be, as I just put some flames under the backups. This can happen, right? The storage can go broken, RAID controller dies, corruption, patch went wrong, administrator gone crazy. Anything can happen basically, yeah? Because it's as it is, like everything fails all the time, right? So imagine that we have this scenario. Well, luckily for us, we have implemented the capacity tier. We have a one-on-one copy here. So first of all, it can be deleted, but I can also use it to restore to my client. Yeah. So if I had, for example, in my data center, I am a hosting company and my client wants to restore some VMs or some files, and my performance tier was not available, not a problem. They wouldn't even know because the backup would still take place from the capacity tier. It will be downloaded from my S3 compatible or my Azure blob, for example. They wouldn't even know that I'm having a problem. Yeah. So how cool is that? And I can, let's say, relaxedly, or as much as you can be relaxed in this situation, go to my storage and try to fix this as soon as possible. But I can just keep on serving my clients, which is, I think, the most important part here. Yeah. Or even if it's completely gone wrong, we can just wipe out the entire performance tier and cache everything back into original format on the storage. Yeah. Another option with capacity tier is that you can very easily restore from it with a community edition. Yeah. Free edition is this. Yeah. So in just a few simple steps, we add the object storage, we import the backups, it will start rescanning. Maybe you need to enter the password and you start restoring. No need to think about jobs or any other configuration. Yeah. So if your client's backups are somewhere stored in this object storage, let's say that the client had set this up themselves and they had their own Azure blob or something else, you can very easily restore from it and then start reconfiguring everything if you want. Yeah. Then archive tier. Yeah. Again, quick recap here where we are. So we are at the end of the scale out repository. So this is something new. Yeah. So this was added in version 11, which we released recently. And as you can see, it only mentions S3 Glacier, yeah, and Azure Archive Blob, because it only works with those. Yeah. So it supports the Azure Archive Blob and the S3 Glacier or S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Yeah. So that's important to know. Now, also on the archive tier, we have a setting for immutability. Just be aware that this works for S3 Glacier only, right? Maybe at some point it will work with Microsoft if they also get something, let's say, on object level. Who knows? Yeah, but at this point in time, it's Amazon S3 Glacier only. Yeah? So on the configuration, you can set the checkbox, make backups immutable for the entire duration of the retention policy. Yeah? But again, before you activate this checkbox, check the retention, because if there was written 3 years, then it will be immutable for 3 years and you are going to pay for 3 years, right? Because you're going to keep it there and you can't remove it. So be careful with that. Think about it in advance before you do something with this. You would not be the first one who actually enabled it and then finds out that it costs too much or we need to delete something. Well, you can't delete it anymore. It's too late. All right. On the other hand, we can also use or standalone or deduped backup files. So meaning that we can store kind of deduped as we store only the deltas, only the differences between the backup files. Or if you really want every backup file should have its own set of blocks or objects, then we can store them as full as well. Again, great blog post that came out recently. So if you want to know more about this specific thing, please go and have a look there. Yeah. So recap on the scale out repository. Again, entire same picture here, right? Just as a quick refresher. So in the end, what we want to say is that the scale out repository is very, very powerful, because once you have set this up, it's all policy based. There's nothing for you to do manually. Everything can be moved automatically. So I can put my data on performance tier. I can copy it automatically into my capacity tier. And then after, let's say 180 days, it is also moved into my archive tier. And the best part, again, can't mention it enough, we can enable immutability everywhere from start to finish. Not that you have to do this, but if you think about it, maybe you said on the poll, yeah, we still have room for improvement. Well, this could be one of the things that could be improved. Maybe you're not using immutability today at all. So maybe for you, this is a good start to say, okay, what is the easiest for us to start using this? Do we already work with object storage? Yes, okay, let's use it there. Or no, and we don't want to because we don't know how this works. So maybe we're good with Linux, so let's start with the hardened Linux repository. But get started with something, because it can save you so much time, so much drama, basically, right? At your client, but also in your own data center, right? And again, Veeam Ready program if you want to check which ones we tested out there. Then as a last thing that I want to mention is a quick question on, I get from quite some service providers, okay, what do I need to offer? Can I not just offer an S3 bucket or an Azure blob directly to my clients? They copy their data into it, and I don't need to run any Veeam Cloud Connect. Well, if we have a look at the architecture itself, the architecture within capacity tier looks like this. Very simple, just need to open HTTPS, and we can copy all the data to the capacity tier of your choice. The next thing with Cloud Connect, it's kind of the same, just a different port. Both are secure, both data encrypted, but I need to set up this entire Cloud Connect platform. That's the difference. With let's say AWS or Azure Blob, it's just a few clicks away and we're done. Here, maybe a little bit more work. But we can also build much more services on top of this. Or we can even bring the capacity tier into our Veeam Cloud Connect and offer it as an extra service there. So what are the main differences? Both are very easy to set up. One a bit easier than the other one. Let's be clear on that, because you need to have a Cloud Connect deployment, and maybe we need to have a session on that one, right? Or go through the best practices deployment guide there. So that might take some extra time. Okay. The object storage I can copy directly. So my client can connect my object storage or public cloud object storage. I don't need extra job. It just goes automatically. Client maybe doesn't even have an idea this is happening, but we made sure that data is copied offsite. Cloud Connect, you have to make the job. The job needs to run, be disabled. It needs to run quite often if you want to be protected. One advantage, however, here is that it allows for different local and offsite retention policies. So maybe client only wants to keep 7 days or 3 days on their side because they don't want to invest in too much storage. And we keep all the bulk of data into our data center at the service provider. So that could be also one of the things. Or maybe they only want to send some applications, some virtual machines offsite and not everything. That is also an option. Yeah, with object storage, it's basically everything, or you need to start making different scale-out repositories. Yeah? So what I see as a point, yeah, let's say not a negative point, but a point of attention is this is managed at the client. So if you have 10 clients, then you have 10 islands where you are configuring this. Yeah, but you can use immutable storage out of the box. Yeah, with Veeam Cloud Connect, the offsite backups are maybe more centralized. Yeah. But it's not only that which I can offer. I can offer immutability. I can offer insider protection, the recycle bin. I can be the second copy. I can be the third copy. I can be the fourth copy for my client. I can offer a whole range of services and extra checkboxes to my client rather than just provide an extra copy to an object storage. Yeah? And of course, you can very easily expand into MSP. Yeah, also manage the client's infrastructure, DRaaS, and maybe install also service provider console to provide you with single pane of glass for management, centralized licensing, yeah, which is also pretty hard to manage if you have all these little islands. So you can build much more services on top of Veeam Cloud Connect. Yeah. So with further ado, let's go into the final part here. And Edwin, giving it back to you, tell us a bit more. In version 11, there was some, well, there's some more security enhancements there. So which ones are they?
Yes, thank you, Peter, for that insight. So over there. So some extra enhancements. If you look at version 11, we did a lot about security. So version 11 is about the service providers and about security. So we had the Veeam backend replication were two different builds. For the United government, we had a FIPS compliant build, and we had a normal build for the rest of the world. But more and more people are looking into FIPS compliancy. So we now have it built in the product. So it's just one build, and you can flip it on or off. If you go into the general options, you will see on the security, there is a FIPS compliancy now. What does that do? Every VBR build is now FIPS compliant. Enable this FIPS mode with just a single checkbox, and that will flip the agents and the way the product is working into FIPS compliant mode with all checks in place for encryption, modules, hardening. It will do it just by one click. But also be aware, if you flip that on, it can impact performance because there are multiple checks being done on top of the normal checks. So that's one to think about if you want to flip on FIPS compliance. But for a lot of global companies, this could be an interesting way to get the product FIPS compliant. So another thing we changed is the persistent guest agent handling. First, we always injected code. It wasn't an agent, but we injected code, it ran as an agent, and then we just retracted the code or dropped it, so it was not there on that machine. You can now install a persistent guest agent. And that's interesting for people that roll out, for instance, templates. You can just put the agent in that template. So you know how it's going to behave, you know what ports are going to be opened, and also you know which executable is being popped up. And you can just tweak all your security systems and tie them into that one. So application-aware processing, and the binaries are updated automatically, so deploy and update it. Think about that for how you do the design. That is an extra option for you to do. So the Linux persistent data mover. Also in Linux itself, when we did the hardened repository, we needed to have a data mover that is persistent because we don't want that interaction over port 22 every time we have to inject code or get things done. So it's persistent there. It's on there, it's being used. And also that's why that only channel that's being used, the 6162, that's the one that's also the management control channel now. So we moved a lot from the 22 into the other channel and also make sure that it runs not as a root. So we don't need privileged users in there. It can just run as a normal user. The data mover itself will run on a local with the right credentials there, but it will not be in a privileged mode. So also the install transport service. No on-demand deployment anymore. It can already be there. So PKI certificates are being used for authentication between that. So it's not about going to the C dollar, opening it up, being an administrator. You can just use the PKI certificates to make sure that those components between an agent and a VBR installation can talk to each other. And that also makes the repository much more secure there. So the Veeam Service Provider Console, I always have a hard time explaining this one. We changed the names a lot, but we added on version 5 multi-factor authentication. And you can configure the multi-factor authentication with a TOTP, time-based one-time password. For instance, the Google Authenticator or anyone else out there that has an app for that, just tie it, connect it to each other. I also have it on my phone for different services. Just put it in, look at that pass or that code that's been generated, put it in, and you have multi-factor authentication enabled for this. But how does that look like? You have MFA, enforce it, can be on a user, can on multiple users. You can just separate that. But what a lot of people didn't know about, and also I didn't know, but I dived more into security because that's one of my passions. In version 4, we already have some things in place to help you protect the environment. So throttling with a temporary lock of IP addresses. So if you have been bombarded from particular addresses, I won't call any countries anymore. That's not nice, but it's more about IP addresses that have been hijacked and being used to try to brute force into that environment. Metrics for monitoring, so we can just monitor on the RESTful API and also on what's going on and act accordingly to what's being seen. Temporary use out of an account attempts have been noticed, and we just raise a predefined alarm for that one. So that's already from version 4, and on version 5 we add MFA on top of it. So key takeaways. Make sure you have a cybersecurity in place. And it's much more than just technology. It's people, process, technology combined together. So look at that and make sure that you do the strategic bet and place the strategic bet on the particular areas where you think for your organization you can reach the max security. Design with security in mind. As a former architect and Peter as an architect, we're always being busy with designs. Make sure that you have it in the base. To change security later on, it's much more harder to place. It's also much more costly than do it right in the base. And look at that scale-out backup repository. There are some really nifty and new things in there, but it also can help you automatically, policy-based, get secure movement of your backup data through the different tiers, but also make it economically efficient. And that's where we all are, and we're all being triggered about. Make sure that if it's security, we can pay for it without losing our job. So apply immutability in every tier. That's a thing about like IAGA, but immutability can really help. And especially with all those attacks going on, make sure you have a data set that's immutable so you can recover from that. So you don't have to pay the rest. You don't have to pay that ransom. Make sure you have options. And improve flexibility by implementing Veeam Cloud Connect. And if you want to know more about that one, Peter can tell you hours and hours on that one, how to set it up, how to do it, how to run your business. So I think, yeah, we have some additional resources. We place some QR codes on there. If you scan the QR code, you go to the ransomware papers. That's a series. Multiple people in the company within Veeam are looking into how we can help you with information, education, how to set things up. Some best practices on the best practices guide from the architects from EMEA. We all chip in there. Make sure that there is information for you that you can look at, think about, and see how you can add that to your cybersecurity defense strategy. Just the GFS retention and so were already being mentioned up in the presentation. Let's put it here as a summary. And I think that we are on top of the hour now.
Yes.
So, questions?
Perfect. Great. So, well, thanks everybody for hanging in there. Yeah, so you will get the recording, you will get the presentation in a couple of days. I see there are a few questions quite a few on the archive tier. If it can be used, let's say with an on-premises S3 object storage, for example. So no, so it was mentioned that it only works today with the Azure or AWS. Yeah, so who knows in the future, but let's say today it only works coming from the capacity tier, coming from AWS and Azure. Yeah. Somebody else is asking when immutability support is coming for Azure Blob Storage. That would be a great one to ask Microsoft as well. So we are also waiting for that. There are quite a few options there in Azure, but not the one on object level. They have something on the container level, I believe. But yeah.
Yeah, to add to that one, Peter, Microsoft is working vividly on that one, so we hope to get it this year, early somewhere. But they're really looking into that because they see the potential there, and that we need an object lock to get that in place on Immutable also for that. So yeah, they're really working on that one.
Okay, perfect. So let's see if there are any other questions. All right, looks like we're good to go. So then we can wrap it up because people might have to go to another meeting or go for lunch, right? To just continue the day. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Edwin, for your great session here. It was really nice to have you. So thank you, everybody, and well, see you soon in the next one. All right. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.